Yes, it is kind of weird that I'm suddenly doing a top 10 list of my favorite love stories in film. I had this idea the other day and I thought, hey, maybe I'll do this as a Valentine's Day thing, until I remembered that Valentine's Day was like 5 months away. So, what the heck, you're getting it now. Love stories. So the inspiration behind me doing this video was a few days ago I watched one of the movies on this list. It's a movie that I watch from time to time, maybe once a year or so, and it's quite enjoyable. And it got me kind of thinking of love stories in films, because there's quite a few love stories that aren't your conventional ones. They're not the sort of thing you'd immediately think of as a love story. And from what I've heard, you guys quite enjoy, you know, when I drop lists of films that you might not have seen before, which, yeah, I really appreciate the feedback on that. So I thought I'd give you a list of my top 10 favorite love stories in films, and hopefully maybe there's something out there that you haven't seen or might inspire you to watch it again. Now, before I get into it, look, I know that it's kind of a broad term what defines a love story. I mean, you've got your conventional ones like The Notebook, Titanic, etc. And while I was sort of thinking of movies like Better Off Dead, for instance, which is one of my favorite comedies, even though it was a love story, the love element of that wasn't really quite enough to motivate me to put it on this list. Then you have things like True Romance, which is a brilliant movie, but again, it's, yeah, kind of touchy as to just how much of a love story it was. So the list that I've come up with, they're the kind of movies that will make you really appreciate your significant other, or if you don't have a significant other, well, make you, you know, kind of feel sad and lonely that you don't have one. So to all the single people out there watching this, I do apologize in advance if I put you in an awkward spot, but hopefully it'll inspire you to want to go out and find that person, that part of your life that will complete you and make you feel whole. So coming in at number 10 we have Now this is definitely a film that falls into the, you know, typical love movie category, but I really like this film a lot. It was very cleverly done. If you haven't seen it, it focuses on a whole bunch of different characters and their stories. It was directed by Richard Curtis, who's one of my favourite British directors as far as comedy goes. This guy is an absolute genius, and there's so many funny moments in this film. I love Bill Nighy's aging rock star character, who just seems perpetually drunk and out of it. He was brilliant. Alan Rickman was fantastic in this film. I love the story of the little boy whose name I can't remember, but his story was awesome. There's so many sweet moments in this film, and it also has Andrew Lincoln from The Walking Dead in his native British accent. I loved his storyline in this film, especially because at the time it first came out, when I saw it, I had this massive crush on a girl, and that scene where he's standing at the door holding the cards with a message to her, oh man, I could relate to that. The cast in this movie, wow, it is one of the biggest ensemble casts ever put in a film, and I'm not even going to bother going through the list here because there are just way too many of them. But Love Actually was a really clever film. It was very well written, the performances were great, brilliantly directed, and yeah, it's definitely one of my all-time favourite love stories. Moving on to number 9. At the time Chasing Amy came out, I was still obsessed with Kevin Smith. Oh my god, I was there opening morning, day one of this movie coming out, and man, it is just such a brilliant piece of 90s cinema. It was a low-budget film. It was shot on 16mm film, stars a younger Ben Affleck in one of his earlier roles, and the story is basically about a guy who's an aspiring comic book artist, and he meets the girl of his dreams, but she's a lesbian. Oh my god, and only Ben Affleck can turn a woman like that. No, but seriously, so, you know, he meets this girl, falls in love with her, and she starts having kind of a inner conflict as to how she's feeling, because she does like this guy, and that was one of the criticisms of the film that a lot of people had, and I kind of did later down the track as well, is that all of a sudden she's in love with him, and it's like, well, hang on a second. I mean, Ben Affleck's a good-looking guy, but really, can he make a lesbian turn just like that? But then you gotta kind of think, you know, especially like in the 90s, there was this whole thing where people were going through conflicting moments with their sexualities. And one of the points of the film was that, you know, maybe your significant other out there, maybe the person who is your ideal partner might not be, you know, exactly what you were thinking they were going to be. But either way, it's a really cool film. You know, the dialogue was just cracking. I mean, Kevin Smith was at his peak at this point, and he delivered an amazing film. The performances were great. The characters were really unique and fresh. And yeah, look, Chasing Amy is a really great film. It I won't give any spoilers, but it does have kind of a bittersweet sort of an ending. It's a realistic ending, and yeah, I really enjoyed the film. Number 8. So, In Your Eyes is a film I talked about recently. Now, this was an amazing find. It was written by Joss Whedon. It is typical Joss Whedon stuff. It's borderline science fiction. It's about two characters, a guy and a girl on opposite ends of the US, and all of a sudden they start seeing what each other is seeing. It does stem back to a childhood incident, but it sort of lay dormant for many years, but then all of a sudden they can actually hear each other in their minds. They can hear each other's voices, and this kind of leads them to figuring out who each other is. And well, you know, when I say that there's this sort of cross-country pursuit to meet each other, there's a lot more involved in the story. But I love the performances in this film, and not only that, the characters were really interesting. They were very flawed characters. And it's just a fascinating premise. That's the one thing that I really love about this movie, is that, you know, yeah, it's kind of far-fetched, but it's really interesting. And yeah, the ending was very warm and fuzzy, and yeah, great movie to cuddle up with someone and watch it. Or again, if you're single, it'll motivate you to want to find someone through telepathy. On to number 7. Serendipity. Okay, so this is the movie that I watched the other day, and it inspired me to do this. This is one of these movies I like to watch it maybe once a year. You got John Cusack as this guy who he believes that everything in life is a coincidence. You know, there's no fate or destiny that drives you or makes things happen. Things just happen. In the meantime, you got flighty Kate Beckinsale, who is a firm believer that there is a larger force that guides us and makes things happen. And so these two meet each other, and look, you just know from the moment they meet that they're meant to be together, and they know it as well. But she puts out a test to see if they are meant to be together, because they each have a partner where he writes his name down on a $5 note, she writes her name and number inside the cover of a book, and she says that she's going to sell the book to a used bookstore the next day. So she tells him that if he finds this book, or if she finds the $5 note and they call each other, then they're meant to be together. And it's quite a fascinating little premise, because I'm one of these people who wrestles with that notion of, you know, fate and destiny and stuff. And you know, for something that on the surface is just kind of a disposable romantic comedy, it really gets you thinking. Because I used to be that person who did believe that, you know, there was like some sort of cosmic force that made things happen. But, you know, as you go on in time and you start growing up, you kind of think, you know, maybe things do just happen out of the blue. But there is that part of me that's like, you know, it'd be nice if things did happen for a reason and stuff. So, you know, whenever I watch this movie, it does get you thinking. And look, yeah, like I said, it's just enjoyable. You know, the performances were great. John Cusack's fantastic. I mean, Kate Beckinsale's not that hard to watch, am I right, guys? And yeah, it's just one of those movies you can kind of turn your brain off and enjoy. So thanks to Serendipity, I am doing this list, and that was my pick for number 7. What could number 6 be? Ah, The Wedding Singer. Remember a time back in the 90s when Adam Sandler was actually funny and his movies were good? Yes, it did happen. So chances are, if you're watching this and you're into movies, you've seen The Wedding Singer. this was one of Adam Sandler's best films, if not maybe his absolute best. The movie is about a guy who's a wedding singer and he's aspiring to be a rock star, and he meets this waitress, and, you know, the two of them, yeah, they meet and they connect, but she's getting married to this guy who's just your typical 80s yuppie pain in the ass. So it's up to Adam Sandler's character, Robbie Hart, to see if he can win her over. In the meantime, being set in the 80s, it's all about materialism and things like that. And there's so many fantastic nods to 80s pop culture. Even throwing Billy Idol in a role, which, yeah, it was kind of interesting that, you know, being that it was a decade later and they were trying to make him look like he did back in the 80s, but who cares? It's Billy frickin' Idol. But the ending of this movie was so beautiful and sweet, and it's just, oh man, it's so hard not to love this movie. There are so many absolutely hilarious moments in the film, and yeah, I mean, like I said, no doubt you guys have seen it already, so you know what I'm talking about. So yeah, The Wedding Singer is definitely in my top 10. Number 5! I'm so glad I got to put an Edgar Wright film in here. And, you know, like I said, I mean, it's kind of a broad subject as to, you know, what defines a love story. I mean, I could have put in Shaun of the Dead or, oh God, so many other movies, but Scott Pilgrim vs. the World is, I mean, that is definitely a pure love story. You got this young guy who meets this girl who he's instantly in love with, but in order to win her heart, he has to combat her 7 exes. And what ensues is this incredibly visual, amazing film where this guy like has to fight these people, but it's all done in a very sort of video game style. There's just such a typical layer of Edgar Wrightness over this whole thing. You know, the way this film is edited, the way it's shot, the dialogue, the performances, everything in this film is just wild. This is definitely one of these things that, yeah, like I said, it doesn't fall into the category of a conventional love story a la The Notebook and stuff like that, because, yeah, you know, it's a hip kind of movie. The soundtrack is electric and the pacing of this film just cracks. It is a great, great film. Don't know if it's really what you'd sort of put into the category of a couples film, unless the two of you are really cool people who are, you know, you're into like fidget spinners and you say totes a lot. I think that's what cool people do. But yeah, look, either way, Scott Pilgrim vs. the World, amazing film. Number 4. Now this is a film that you may not have heard of. Before Sunrise, look, it's not going to be everyone's cup of tea. This was directed by Richard Linklater. It stars Ethan Hawke and Julie Delpy as these two strangers who meet on a train in Europe. She's a French girl, he's an American tourist, and the two of them just start up a conversation, and they decide to get off the train together and spend a night in, oh boy, this is where I should have done my research. Was it Vienna? I think it was Vienna. I'm gonna say Vienna. So the two of them go wandering through the streets talking. This movie has a lot of dialogue, so if you're not into dialogue heavy films, maybe I wouldn't recommend it to you, but either way, it is fascinating. It is almost like you're a fly on the wall, that you're actually with these people. The dialogue is so realistic. The feelings that these people have are very realistic, and in a way, it's the kind of movie, even if you've never been in this situation, you sort of feel as though you can relate to it in a way. And the movie spawned 2 sequels as well. There was a sequel, Before Sunset, I think it was called, which came out 10 years later and was actually set 10 years later, so that was quite fascinating. And I'm trying to remember the name of the third one. I think it was After Midnight. I haven't actually seen it yet, but it's one of those movies that's on my list of movies I really want to see because I love the first 2. It's definitely worth checking out the second one. But yeah, look, the first one really worked. Even if you're put off by the idea of a lot of dialogue, maybe check it out anyway, because it was very interesting and engaging dialogue. And you know, when you get inside these characters' minds and hearts, you know, it's just fascinating stuff. But it's not as fascinating as number 3. Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind is Oh, wow, it is such a fantastic film. This was directed by a French guy named Michel Gondry, who has done a lot of music video work, and all his stuff is just out there. It is fresh and unique and original and inventive. So this movie featured Jim Carrey in one of his more dramatic roles, and my god, the dude killed it. I mean, to go from Ace Ventura... Alrighty then! Oh, sorry about that. That was terrible. But yeah, you know, in his more serious movies like Number 23 and stuff like that, like, the guy is an absolutely fantastic actor, and this movie was one of his most shining performances. He stars alongside Kate Winslet, and the two of them play a couple who... Now, the movie's very disjointed. It's told in a non-linear kind of fashion, and it's got such an art house kind of element to it, but... At the same time, you know, it is kind of a mainstream film. So the two of them meet and they decide that they want to be together, but they then start to realize that they had actually met before. And the story goes, there's this company called Lacuna Incorporated, and their job is to erase memories. So it turns out the two of them had actually already been in a relationship together for 2 years, I believe it is, and they've had the memory of their relationship erased. But, you know, and again, this whole fate and destiny thing, it seems as though fate has brought them together again for a second chance. In the meantime, we meet the team at Lacuna Inc. What is it? Elijah Wood, Kirsten Dunst, Mark Ruffalo. While the procedure is taking place, you know, these guys have their own story as well. It's just a fascinating film, brilliantly directed. The shooting and editing in this thing is absolutely extraordinary. It is a visual masterpiece. And it is definitely one of those kind of films that if you're the kind of person who doesn't like art house films, if you like your Transformers, you could actually get involved in a conversation with film critics and, you know, spout your knowledge of art house cinema by constantly referencing this film. Maybe not. But either way, look, it's a damn good film. Highly recommended. Number 2. Wait, stop. Okay, just hold it right there before you click the dislike button and think I'm an absolute lunatic for putting this movie on my list. Please let me explain. So yes, Cloverfield is a movie that annoyed a lot of people because it was a shaky cam, found footage style movie about a giant monster attacking New York City. But that's not the way I interpret this film. To me, this is one of the most heart-wrenching love stories I have ever seen committed to film, and I'm gonna back it up 100% because you got this guy who has, you know, he loves this girl, but things have gone sour and he hasn't had a chance to tell her how he feels. And all of a sudden, you know, she is injured in this monster attack in the middle of the city. And this guy stops at nothing in order to get to her so he can rescue her and finally tell her how he feels. And the end of the movie, my god, like, okay, I'm not going to spoil it just in case you haven't seen it. But if you have seen it, you know the scene I'm talking about, under the bridge. Oh my god. That scene gets me right in the feels. Deep in the feels. And it's not so much that scene, but you know how in the film you have this thing where every now and then when they hit stop on the recording, you get like a little glimpse of the tape that was on there previously. I love that little snippet at the very end where, you know, they're talking about how it was a good day or whatever. Wow. Oh man, every time I watch that movie, all of a sudden there's a lot of dust in the room and it gets in my eyes. So, like I said, this is definitely not what you would typically put on the list of love story films, but to me, that's just how I see it. I enjoy the monster aspect. I like found footage movies when they're done well, and to me, this is one of the better ones. But yeah, at its heart, this movie is one of the most beautiful love stories I've seen in a film, and I don't care what you say, that's how I feel. But it's not as good as number 1. So this is definitely another one that you wouldn't typically find on a list of love stories. But not only is this one of my most favorite movies of all time, this is on my list of my top 10 favorite movies, which I did a while back. This to me is the pinnacle, the absolute crescendo, the apex, if you will, of love stories in film, because Cloverfield, okay, that's about a guy who's braving a monster attack to reach his girlfriend. Well, this time around you got a guy who freaking comes back from the dead to avenge his lover. So this is a dark gothic romance about a guy and his fiancée who are killed one night, and he rises from the dead through the power of a crow who can bring people back to avenge themselves. And he puts on freaking awesome black and white makeup and dresses in one of the freaking coolest costumes in film history and grabs an electric guitar and goes out and murders the gang one by one. But yeah, while it's got all that on the surface, I mean, God, there's so many powerful moments involving the romance between Shelley and Eric Draven. And I think it culminates in a scene where he's in a pawn shop and he's got to try and find the engagement ring that he gave her, and he's sifting through this box of rings with his eyes closed and just pulling various rings out, and when he finally finds the one, he just has this moment where he knows that's the one, and oh my God, you know, ever since the first day I saw this film, you know, it just always hit me like, imagine being that deeply in love with someone that there was this spiritual connection like that, or, you know, over an object. My God. But I just love everything about this film. It was superbly directed. The tone is just consistent the whole way through. The performances are amazing, but I love the dialogue. The script in this film just had so many poetic lines of dialogue that you will never forget. Oh, and the soundtrack album, oh my God, it was brilliant. And again, I know, like, you know, I'm always saying that I'm a big fan of 90s cinema, and this was definitely one of the high points of the 90s. But to me, it is the ultimate cinematic love story, and that's just how I feel about it. So there's my list of my 10 most favorite love stories on film. Now, I'd love to know what you guys think, not only about the list that I've given, but what are some of your favorites? Because my God, there are so many movies like 500 Days of Summer and all these other movies that I could have put in here, but yeah, there's a lot of films out there. And oh boy, I came this close to including the first 10 minutes of Pixar's Up, because that first 10 minutes alone is probably more of a love story than my entire top 10 list put together. But I'd definitely love to hear what some of your favorites are, particularly if there's some unconventional love stories that not many people would include in these sort of lists. So drop me some comments either here or on Facebook. All the social media links are in the description below, because I like to talk about movies and I would love to talk about movies with you. I'll catch you next time.
Click subscribe to stay up to date with all the latest movie reviews. Skynet will be taking over any day now, so what have you got to lose? Nyah.